It is incorrect for you to have extended an invitation to declare. It is incorrect for you to have extended an invitation to declare. It is incorrect for you to have extended an invitation to declare. It is incorrect for you to have extended an invitation to declare. It is incorrect for you to have extended an invitation to declare.
I now suspend the proceedings.
It is incorrect for you to have extended an invitation to declare. It is incorrect for you to have extended an invitation to declare. It is incorrect for you to have extended an invitation to declare. It is incorrect for you to have extended an invitation to declare. It is incorrect for you to have extended an invitation to declare.
I now suspend the proceedings.
it is incorrect for you to have extended an invitation to declare.
I now
6 years after 2018, when President Cyril Ramaphosa made his New Dawn speech to Mamina, he said, "Lend me a hand and let's fix this country." Well, it's 6 years later, and it seems like the New Dawn has turned into a new yawn. If you read the newspaper posters and if you listen to columnists and read what they've been saying over the past few days in expectation of tonight's State of the Nation address by President Cyril Ramaphosa. Welcome to News 24. My name is Adrian Basson, Editor-in-Chief, and we're coming live to you from the Media 24 Centre in Cape Town tonight to analyze the state of the nation. Before the President tells us what he thinks is the state of the nation, I'm joined by Carol Payton, our writer-at-large, as well as Kunita Hunter, our Assistant Editor for Politics and Opinion. Welcome, Kunita and Carol, and thank you for joining me. Colleagues, I wanted to start by asking you to do a little game, play a little game with me. So what I wanted to ask you, there's been a lot of talk about how boring the speech is going to be and he's not going to address the real issues. So I'm going to ask you to tell us what are the real issues. So Kunita, starting with you, what are the three things that President Cyril Ramaphosa will definitely not announce tonight that he should have actually spoken about?
He will not announce a more efficient, cleaner executive and state, which he promised in 2018. He will not announce a big number of convicted corruption cases or cases that have reached completion in terms of corruption. And he will not announce the end of load shedding.
The end of load shedding. Carol, that is a great list. I don't know if you can top that.
Well, he might announce the end of load shedding, but he won't be speaking the truth, right?
Oh, sorry.
No, I think I agree. Look, I've got a similar list to Kunita, that unfortunately he's not going to tell us that those people, those ANC members who were named in the Zondo report are going to not be on the party's list and not be MPs and not be in the cabinet. So I think that's a big disappointment. I think he won't be telling us that he's ending cadre deployment, which sees him sees the ANC sending people into the state and has meant to really been a large contributor to the weakness of the state. And I might be wrong on this one, but I don't think he's going to announce that the transaction to sell SAA, which was concluded like 2.5 years, what was initiated 2.5 years ago, has been concluded.
Are people expecting that?
No. We're not expecting it.
I was going to be surprised if Carol Payton did not speak about SAA in her top list. So we have SAA. Those are impressive lists, but there's much more. The intelligence agency has still not been split up into two.
And he doesn't have a head.
Yes.
He doesn't have a head of domestic intelligence, and he doesn't have a head of foreign intelligence. So the three top spies of the country, those positions are vacant.
So we don't have spies, basically. And Carol, the unbundling of Eskom, I mean, things have happened, few things have happened, but it's still not properly happened. But we'll get to that in a moment. The one other thing we won't see tonight are the Red Berets. The EFF has been banned from attending Parliament, or at least 6 of their top leaders has been barred by the Western Cape High Court, by Parliament actually. They can't attend because of what happened at last year's Sona, when they stormed the podium where President Ramaphosa was delivering his 2023 State of the Nation in the Cape Town City Hall. And just a few moments ago, we heard from the EFF's leadership that in protest of the court ruling this afternoon by the Western Cape High Court, that the entire party's contingent in Parliament will boycott tonight's State of the Nation address. So there will be less read in Parliament or in the City Hall, Parliament sitting in the City Hall tonight. Let's quickly have a look at a clip from our colleague Jason Felix in Parliament representing News24, who's been following the EFF's case very closely.
So for now, we all know that the EFF's top leadership, which includes Julius Malema, Sinao Tambo, Vuyani Pambo, Marshall Dlamini, Frochi Vambu, and Umbuyiseni Ndlozi, we all know by now that they will not be at this year's State of the Nation address. This comes after they were sanctioned with a suspension that will last from 1 February up until the end of the month, and they also will see their salary docked for the same month. This was because they disrupted the Sona of 2023 last year, which was shocking events when they stormed the stage and caused complete panic and disruption. So over the past few weeks, the EFF has been fighting desperately to get back into the Sona. We know that there's been multiple court cases, multiple failed court cases, I might add. So the EFF still has 38 members in the National Assembly, and whatever they may do, we can only, it remains to be seen. It really remains to be seen what they will do. But as we know, the EFF, for the last few years that they've been in Parliament, actually since they've started in Parliament, they've always caused disruptions. And as far as we know and as far as we expect those disruptions to be even bigger than last year. This year, we have new parliamentary rules which have been adopted in December last year. And the most important one of these rules include that no member shall rise on a point of order, ask questions, or disrupt the president while he is speaking. That's a very pertinent rule because the EFF has used the point of order system or the point of order rule to disrupt the House by raising frivolous points of orders at the same time from various members, which causes disruption on a complete chaotic scale. The other point is that members of Parliament have been asked to behave, they've been asked to ensure that the decorum of the House is orderly and that the House remains orderly up until the end of the State of the Nation address. We also know that there's a large police contingent outside the parliamentary precinct as well as inside the chamber. There will also be law enforcement officers who will be ready to be called upon when needed should any disruption of the sorts of last year arise again. This is the last Sona before the general election, and if I was the EFF, I would do everything to get the attention upon myself and to go out with a bang. It's an important election year. It's an important election year for the EFF. They have growing support. They have a PR style that works for them, and they certainly would want to just get it out there and get all the attention on themselves and make sure that they lead the coverage, that they lead the political discourse and the discussions that will take place after the Sona. So I'm of the view that the EFF will do everything in their power, as little as they are in the National Assembly compared to the ANC and other parties. They would do everything in their power to go out with a bang and make sure that people remember what the EFF did and what the EFF is going to do, because this will set the tone for the general elections for this year.
And that was Jason Felix, our colleague in Parliament, talking about the EFF. Quinita Hunter,
so for now we all know that the EFF...
It's almost been, I've just been thinking back, I think the first year that the EFF disrupted the State of the Nation was still under former President Jacob Zuma.
2014. Just after the elections, when that State of the Nation took place.
Yes.
The EFF, obviously they were much smaller contingent at the time, but it was the first time we saw that type of disruption with hashtag pay back the money.
Yes, about the Nkandla report. So it's been 10 years that we've had these three hat-tricks at Parliament. I think maybe the first 2 years, because the Nkandla moment was such a big one, they probably had a bit of sympathy from the public at large who felt they were doing the right, or they were standing up for the right cause. It felt like Parliament was pretty heavy-handed towards them, the so-called white shirts. But I think over the year it's lost its sting, right? This theatrics by the EFF, and tonight they won't be there.
And also it has proven to be very violent, and the EFF has over the years shown that they rely on violence as a form of political display. And so you don't only see it in Parliament, you see it in councils, and I think the public have grown tired of that. But more importantly, last year was exceptionally violent. I didn't see that level of violence before. I mean, kind of charging at a president in the way that it had. It was televised. They obviously deny that the president was under any threat or in danger at all. But the court was very clear that the sanction of Parliament, that the 6 MPs cannot be present, stands. And so they have, tried to challenge a lot of these suspensions in court. The courts have been very clear. The Western Cape High Court has thrown out almost all of their applications so far. There's been different ones, and I think that their absence is important because this weekend the EFF is launching their manifesto, and obviously they want to capture the South African imagination as they try to amp up their presence and coverage ahead of the elections. And so Sona is always a big moment for the EFF to stamp its presence, and the absence today affects their relevance as they try to ramp up support ahead of the elections.
Do you think this will become their rallying cry, one of their rallying cries in the next few weeks, heading into the election campaign, that they almost could turn themselves into martyrs because of these kind of rulings that banned them from a Sona? Absolutely,
and I think that it will be used in their pursuit against President Cyril Ramaphosa, and making the claim, as they have in court, that Parliament was repurposed to protect the president, and using the Pala case. Although on the Pala case, today they just applied to the Constitutional Court to review Parliament's decision. And so you can see a multi-pronged approach by the EFF to use the courts, to use public rallies, and at the same time to fight their way against this ruling by Parliament and the Speaker. What's very important is that we normalized that level of disruption, and other political parties almost started following suit. You actually saw the DA trying similar theatrics over the years. And I do think that what Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa, I'm thinking Thandi Modise, I've mixed up my years. But I mean, what she's hoping for is that there's kind of a reset of order. And I think South Africans perhaps deserve that, because we should hear from the president and we should appraise him based on what he actually says, not so much on the theatre. The theatrics.
We're watching the screen on the side. There is now just after 6:10. The State of the Nation will be delivered in about just less than 50 minutes by President Ramaphosa. This is his 8th State of the Nation address. It's the 6th administration's last State of the Nation address as we go into election season. And Carol Payton, this is very much an election Sona. This is very much a political Sona. I mean, we are less than 3 months away, we think, and I hope that's one answer we will get tonight, is the election date, away from a very, very important election, 30 years after democracy came to this country. Do you think Cyril Ramaphosa is going to make a campaign speech tonight?
Look, I think he has to, like he always does, praise himself and the government for doing, for all the stuff that they have done. And so we can definitely expect that. I think adding to that, we can maybe expect a bit on, this is 30 years of democracy, let's celebrate it, look how far we've come, look where we came from. And I think that's a real emotive thing that is going to be used in the election. So I think that's, the kind of rallying around, we did bring liberation, we are the party of national liberation, trust us, believe us, we can do better, we promise we will, etc. And I think that's the most important thing of the election. Yeah, he might announce that, he'd like to make the basic income grant, the 350 Rand grant, a permanent thing.
Which is important, I think.
It is, and he might say that yes, the presidential employment stimulus is going to go on, but I think those things would probably have happened election year or not election year. In a way, it's a bit too late to be putting new things in place that will make a difference to people's lives.
But it's desperate times for the ANC, Quinita. Hunter, we've just seen in the past 2 days the latest poll, and there's going to be lots of polls heading into election season, so let's not take every poll at its word, but we've seen a poll by Ipsos, who's one of the biggest, most trusted polling agencies out there, putting the ANC support at 40%, 40, heading into an election probably less than 3 months away. Is this going to be the launch of the ANC's campaign tonight, unofficially?
I think the ANC has long launched its campaign, and it has three big characteristics. First is that Ramaphosa could not implement the full reforms that he would have liked 6 years ago because he was robbed of 2.5 to 3 years because of COVID. So you see that. You see a big reliance on blaming the state capture years. For the lack of reform or for the tardiness in implementation of the reforms. And then you also see the apartheid comparison. So that messaging is going to be consistent. What's different about this election year is that possibly in 2019 and before that in 2014, a president had a little bit more room to make bold promises. But our fiscus can't support, and I think people have realized that. So beyond that basic income grant, which you have to do because there's no way you can pull the plug on it and not create social disorder, I think, and the presidential employment stimulus, you can't really dish out much. And we saw it already last year that the interventions were very, superficial. We got an electricity minister last year, right? So I don't see. That one thing that people in bars and shopping centers, Cyril's did this for us, I don't think we're going to see much of that.
Do you think we're going to get the election day tonight?
So we're expecting that, but yesterday Vincent Magwenya, the president's spokesperson, said he would within 2 weeks of the Sona, he'd announce it. So it's a matter of whether he seizes the moment because the country's watching, but he said the announcement's imminent.
Imminent in Ramaphosa's world, of course, doesn't mean imminent in the normal sense of the word. Carol, there was a poster from our sister newspaper, City Press, on Sunday about Sona, and it said Ramaphosa, blah, blah, blah. Have we reached that point?
I think a lot of people feel that we've reached that point, that it's going to be another very long speech where he talks about, all the achievements, and it's going to be like more of the same, blah, blah, blah. And I think that the things that would give people really hope, there's not much that he can put out there. So I do feel that. And I think that one of the problems he faces is, as you say, imminent is not a word he understands, is that things have taken so long to happen that, we can expect him talking about the same things in this speech that he talked about in last year's speech. The unbundling of Eskom, the Electricity Regulation Amendment Act, all of those things, the act to amend the NPA Act, all of those things, we're going to hear about them again tonight because they weren't actually done in the past year.
Yes,
Amy, I wanted to use an example of the president focusing on the capacity of the state and talking about this lackadaisical approach to actually follow through in your own commitment. No one thrust upon the president to to prioritize the capability of the state. He diagnosed that we cannot fix South Africa's problems if the state is not fixed. And he repeated it every year, and he made commitments every year. He commissioned a report in 2019, it was ignored. But he announced it, that this is the work that we're doing, that to reduce the size of the executive.
Rita, just pause for a moment. We can now see the judiciary entering the City Hall in Cape Town. So the judges of the country, led by Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. Yes, Raymond Zondo, Chief Justice. We've had a few. There we can see Raymond Zondo, followed by the Deputy Chief Justice and the rest of the judiciary entering Parliament. We also can see the Navy military band still playing. And there were also some Cape minstrels out there doing their thing. So the dignitaries are arriving. Sorry, Kunita, I was interrupting you.
No, but the point is that you had the president making these commitments and then not following through on the commitments. So he promises 3 Sonas ago, I'm going to have performance agreements for ministers. And so opposition asks, where are they? Where is it? Okay, here are they. Okay, from 2020 till 2024, you've only had one performance review with ministers. And then when we ask, where is it? Because we're not asking for it. You promised that it would be made public. You say, we don't want the opposition to use it as an election tool, right? Simple things like extending the term of director generals, right? So stability in government, that's your focus. Cabinet makes an announcement, nothing gets done, like literally nothing gets done. And so the trend that you see with the president in different areas, I'm just using this as an example, but you'll see it in Eskom, is that a lot of work gets put into making the perfect announcement. And then that's where it stops. And when he is held accountable against his own commitments, it is interpreted as opposition versus accountability. And so what you end up doing is announcing menial sort of achievements and reinventing them as if they're new promises, when actually, since 2018, you've promised this. And so we're going to hear achievements in the form, in terms of NSFAS, for example. 2018, there were so many people. There were about 500,000 students funded by NSFAS. Now it's 1.something million. But that's because Zuma changed the law in 2017.
During Nasri.
Yeah. So a lot of the achievements that are going to be punted tonight have to be checked against the benchmark or against what it is that he's actually. The context.
Well, we'll be trying as best as we could to live fact check his speech tonight.
Yeah.
We've got a number of colleagues, including the three of us, who will chip into the News24 live update. So please do follow the President's speech on News24 and our live update in the app or whatever you use to read News24, because we will be fact checking and we will try and as quick as possible and fast as possible check those promises, whether they're empty, whether they're old, or whether they just don't make sense. Carol, you were you remember 1994. Kenita doesn't. You were working in the ANC's information department, and it was a few months before you joined the Sunday Times as a journalist.
That's right.
Looking back 30 years, I mean, this is a momentous moment. It's, I almost get goosebumps thinking it's 30 years of democracy. Maybe let me put on my positive cap for a while. What would you say was the biggest achievement probably that we can celebrate after 30 years, rightly so, tonight, that we will definitely hear tonight? Is it the Constitution? Is it the rule of law? Whatever you think. And then probably the biggest disappointment for you, thinking back of those days.
Look, the Constitution obviously was a great victory, but it's empty if it's not a living document, and if the rights that are in the Constitution are not being experienced and exercised and felt by people. So, I don't think that I think that's undone. That's work that's still undone. I think what I expected and what I thought would be a dead certain thing they would do would be to really improve education, so that by now, 30 years later, we wouldn't have a situation where you've still got so many people trapped in poverty because they don't have opportunities, and that I think's been a disappointment, and the acceptance that it's okay to be mediocre, it's okay to muddle along, it's okay, we'll just lower the pass rate and look, we're improving, and pat ourselves on the back. So I think that's for me a real big disappointment.
Kenita, this reminds me of something I read earlier today. Equal Education, that wonderful NGO that's been keeping the basic education department on its toes over norms and standards over the past 20 years, released a statement earlier today, and I just took this one quote to read to you, which I think brings so starkly to the table this point that Carol has so crisply made now, which is, in his 2029, this is a quote from them, in his 2019 Sona speech, Ramaphosa promised that all pit toilets would be eradicated from schools by the end of 2022. more importantly, 30 years into democracy, we still have today over 700 schools nationwide using illegal, dangerous pit toilets as their only form of sanitation. We're not talking here about load shedding or renewable energy. We're talking toilets, 30 years after democracy. This is a major indictment.
You know, the reality of where the ANC is and where it meets the electorate is that in 30 years, you made improvements and you've slipped and you've gone back. And that, I think, is the most difficult thing that they're going to have to face, is that these commitments and these very specific commitments on very basic things like pit toilets, but then water is a huge issue in the country at the moment. And yesterday, News24 Business ran a story from Ghulam Balam saying water is going to be the new load shedding issue from this year. And I've been traveling. Obviously, we started doing coverage around the country for elections, and I was in a really impoverished part of South Africa called Kwakwa. And people don't have water. But then in Joburg, people don't have water, and and there's no drought in South Africa. And so the real manifestation of government ineptitude and failure is indignity for people in the form of pit toilets and the lack of just running water in taps, let alone clean drinking water, just any water. And Abi, the problem that Ramaphosa has is that there's not been a single issue that he owned that there's a clear marked difference on. I cannot pinpoint just visa, even if it was just visa regime, like completely from start to finish, that process is completely, this is my complete deliverable. I've done, finished, this is sorted out. That's a issue of the past. But toilets could have been an easy one, to say, 0, 6 years, done, put toilets are a thing of the past. Almost like what HIV was for Jacob Zuma, where you could use that one particular issue as that trump card, I mean, we can talk about corruption of Jacob Zuma, but
he didn't champion. He championed it in a different way.
Yeah, but I look for it. I really do, like in a very objective, sober way, to say, okay, let's take. Like I really thought, that parastatals was going to be it for him.
Well, I guess we're talking about his legacy. So if his presidency had to end now, what would we say? President Ramaphosa achieved this. And at the moment, there's nothing that we can really put our finger on.
Are we being too harsh, though?
No, I don't think so. Because I think that President Ramaphosa came in to government and expected that it would be a much easier ride than it actually was, and I think he expected that Ramaphosa would be enough to engender investment, growth, and so on. And
there was that goodwill, I think.
And there was goodwill, but I think that he didn't carry it through. He didn't do the things that are needed to create an investment climate. So his legacy, unfortunately, at this point, is not much.
I think you're asking a good question. Are we too harsh? Because I think he would say, well, look at SARS. When I came in, Tomoyane was still running SARS. There was no investigative capacity. The so-called rogue unit that was never a rogue unit was just disbanded. Edward Kieswetter's contract has just been extended this week. SARS seems to be in much better shape. So, okay, there's one thing, and I think we can tick that box.
But did they meet their targets?
They didn't meet their targets, but I don't think that was an internal SARS issue. I think Adrian's right. I think that the SARS has been an achievement.
I think at Eskom, and hear me out, he brought in a new board, he brought in the rater from the private sector.
But if you were a voter, can you like
No, I'm thinking where we were in beginning 2018 when Jacob Zuma was the night of the long knives, when he was so dramatically removed by the NEC of the ANC. Ramaphosa came in, you had Brian Molefe running Eskom, you had Tomoyane running SARS, you had Sean Abrams and Nomgobo Jiba running the NPA, you had Burning Tlemeza running the Hawks. Those people are all gone, they're gone.
Except that I must disagree with you on Eskom very vehemently, because honestly, the story of Eskom has been 6 ways to wasted years, because they did not put the right people into the board, and they did not do the right things.
And those were easy things to do.
They didn't act in a way that, they were in denial for quite a long time. So I don't think, there's been strides in Eskom, and in fact the performance on Eskom is deteriorating. What has improved is that people are building their own solar. So I mean, Eskom for me and the whole parastatal story actually is a big failure. I think partly they underestimated it, yes, and they'll say that. This was all state capture. It was terribly, terribly hard. But I think that in all of them there's a similar pattern, and that pattern is they brought in the wrong people. They brought in people they trusted rather than people who had the capability, and they continue to do that.
I want to come back to Eskom in a second, Carol, because last year was the year with the largest amount of load shedding days ever in the history of the country. And in fact, we are, I think, on stage 2 as we speak. There are millions of South Africans who won't be able to follow the state of the nation tonight because they won't have power, electricity. But Quinita, I wanted to, on the note of things that the ANC have gotten right or victories, probably the most recent one that's given the president reason to smile is the ICJ case, the International Criminal Justice Court. You were there when South Africa argued its case against Israel, and you've covered the victory or the rulings extensively. You have the in-depth knowledge. Do you think that the president, the government, the ANC sees this as something they can campaign on, that this is a moment where their moral position, moral conscience in the world has almost been restored, even for a fleeting moment, but that could help them to maybe don't perform that poorly as Ipsos think they would? I
think that the ANC has lost that moral standing of being the liberating organization, or being the liberator of South Africa, the liberation movement. And so what is happening in Gaza, and the ANC's consistent support and solidarity with the people of Palestine creates and reaffirms that position that, if anything, we will always stand with the oppressed, and we will always fight for the oppressed. So it evokes a sense of positive nostalgia, firstly, among South Africans. Secondly, it affirms South Africa's moral standing, and we can debate, the wishy-washy nature of our foreign policy. And then the third thing, what it does is and this has been really, I think, one of the positives of the Ramaphosa administration, is that South Africa has really become a serious contender on the international stage when it comes to geopolitics, which is unmatched to our economic drama and our woes that we are facing.
Because of this case?
No, not because of this case. I think Ramaphosa, from the start of his presidency, leveraged a lot of things to be. From the time we took over as AU chairperson in 2018 to the role that South Africa played in COVID-19. I think COVID was the big thing, and I really, really do think that Ramaphosa played a very, very good role on multilateral platforms globally, and he will be remembered for that. BRICS, the way he has positioned BRICS, the way he negotiated, the way South Africa punched above our weight at the World Trade Organization during COVID around patents for vaccines. So we've been punching above our weight. This was a continuation of this. I think this was the grand finale, if you like. And I do think that it played very well for us. But sitting in that court, and I wrote about it on News24 that day, you could not be proud to be a South African. The articulate nature in which South Africa was arguing its case to the International Court of Justice, which is a judicial body of the United Nations, using United Nations report, and also affirming the role of multilateral organizations like the United Nations at a time when it's under attack by people like Trump. And so there's this, in a leaderless world and a global order that's being upset, South Africa, on the far south of the world, is actually showing up. And I find that to be quite impressive, but at the same time, really sad that the same vigor is not attached to local home
toilets
issues.
Conita, is this an issue that you think he can or will campaign on?
Yes, 100%, and I think that it at the baseline, it's about the Palestinian people and the suffering that they are facing, but also it is the thing that the trump card the ANC uses that says they may take you back to apartheid. We brought you out of apartheid.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We are now seeing the Guard of Honor is starting to prepare outside the City Hall of Cape Town. I'm hearing some rumblings. I think those are the jets we bought through the arms deal that's revving their engines to fly over. We'll hear them some, and then at some point we're going to hear the 21 gun salute, but the military is certainly standing by. It's now just about 25 minutes to 7, standing by for the Sona, the State of the Nation address by President Cyril Ramaphosa, his 8th State of the Nation address. Can you believe that, Carol? The first one in 2018, and here we are. We were a bit naughty today. We were kind of intimating that it may be his last. Do you think it may be? Even if the ANC wins the election?
Look, I don't think it'll be his last. I think even if the ANC doesn't do very well in the election, if it gets sort of low 40s and needs to take on a partner, I still think Ramaphosa would be president, and I think he's the most acceptable person in the ANC and probably to an opposition partner. If that is not the FF, but I also think that he's going to, when he runs his election campaign, he's going to tell us that he's there for another 5 years, and I cannot imagine him sticking it out for another 5 years. I think that's a long time. And then of course there's the wild card of the ANC, because if the ANC does do badly, what does the ANC then do? What is their response to Ramaphosa? Do they respond to that? But yeah, I do think he will be president again.
In 2-3 months time. Carol, I want to come back to Eskom. So we had 332 days of load shedding last year, the largest, the worst year in the history of load shedding. We had Andre de Ruyter's dramatic departure from Eskom with the accompanying drama of secret intelligence reports, and we had a long period without a chief executive. Then we had Dan Marukane being appointed late last year. What can or will, how does this president spin himself out of the Eskom mess and the load shedding mess tonight? What can he say?
Look, I think what he says is that load shedding has reduced, and we know that it has. And it's, since summer it has reduced, and the main reason it's reduced is because there are about 5,000 megawatts of solar PV which has been built both by companies who are doing their own sort of generation and households. So that is what is really eased the situation. Eskom's performance has actually not improved. I mean, its performance in January, I think it was on just around 50% of its plant was in working order. So I think that's what he says, and hopefully he won't tell us he's going to end load shedding, because the government's own this year, because the government's own plan, the integrated resource plan, says we've got several more years of load shedding, which in itself is a problem. It would be great if he said, look, that's not ambitious enough, I'm going to end it. So I think that that's how he does it, and I think that people are feeling a bit better. Although I'm sure there are parts of the country where, because there's so much pressure and on the infrastructure and substations blow up all the time and so on, that people in many township areas are left without electricity for long periods. Very different to us in the suburbs.
I mean, this week we saw large parts of the Western Cape being without electricity around the Little Karoo or the Klein Karoo. Let's have a look at our colleague Jan Gerber. He's also one of News24’s journalists in Parliament, and we've spoken a lot about the successes or the failures of the Ramaphosa era. Let's hear what Jan has to say about this topic.
We discussed in Parliament last year was obviously the electricity crisis, unemployment, crime and corruption. Unfortunately, President Ramaphosa doesn't have much progress to show on these topics and many other things. It is expected that he will say that his administration has done the groundwork to improve on it this coming year. Towards the end of last year, the issue of Gaza, the war in Gaza, cropped up in many debates, even some that didn't have anything to do with international relations. It's expected that President Ramaphosa will make much about the government's case in the International Court of Justice in The Hague last month, which is one of the successes of his administration. One of Parliament's most important functions is holding the executive to account. Unfortunately, this oversight role in Parliament has not been fulfilled successfully over the last year. One of the biggest omissions is a committee to oversee the presidency. However, Sona is one of the ways in which the President accounts to Parliament. Therefore, it is quite important, especially when it comes to the debate, which will be held next week. This year's State of the Nation address is probably more important because it is an election year. This means President Ramaphosa will likely focus on what he considers his administration's achievements. He will also take a look at what the government has done over the past 50 years of democracy, because that's also something that we celebrate this year. During the debate, it is expected that the opposition parties would have a good go at the governing party, President Ramaphosa, and his administration's failings. However, he will have an opportunity to respond, and it is expected that the debate will be very hotly contested and very much a campaigning platform.
And that was Jan Gerber, our News24 parliamentary correspondent, talking about the Ramaphosa era. Who knows whether he will be coming back later this year. Carol Payton, I want us to come back to Eskom because it is a very important part of the state of the nation. Isn't it quite ironic that solar and private solar, South Africans really again pulling together and saying, if we can afford it, let's put solar on our roofs. Isn't it quite ironic that may, in a way, have saved the ANC at the election?
Well, it is, and I think a major theme of the speech tonight is going to be the role of the private sector, and I think that the President is going to talk about the success of this partnership he has with the private sector and emphasize this to investors, because from an investor perspective, this is the one ray of hope, that things can be fixed because you've got massive interventions there coming from the private sector. So I think it is ironic, but I think we must remember that okay, it leaves the country better off. That's true. There's less load shedding, but the fact that people can do things without government, that's wealthy people who can do things without government, and state dysfunctionality really hits poorest people harder, and I think that is something we have to remember. We can do some things in spite of the state failure. We can do lots of things, but we can't actually address sort of the big structural issues of poverty and unemployment. And that's exactly what a lot of people are saying, is that this where we clap when a bank puts up makes robots solar powered in a business district. That's the role of the state. And so what we're doing as South Africans is we're just becoming less reliant on the state. So the acute impact of state failures, it doesn't hurt us as painfully, but it's still hurting people because and we see it in municipalities and again, when I say that I really thought I would see intervention in parastatals, I really had optimism around the state of local government, and that's my little pet project in just understanding the complexity of local government. By relying on a cliche, every single Sona of district development model being this bullet that's going to save local government, it has not. Local government has gotten worse under Ramaphosa. I can put my neck out and say that. And so what's happening is an elite few kind of rally together to thrive in spite of government, and you then have so structurally, we're not even. Our best case scenario is poverty levels to stay the same and unemployment to stay the same. That's our best case scenario. The fact that the curve is downward is what gives me a pit in my stomach. And I think that's when we say the lost opportunity is, if things didn't get better, it shouldn't have gotten worse.
And unemployment has gotten worse, and poverty definitely
And
is
crime.
getting worse. Yeah.
Crime is at the highest rate in 15 years. Carol, I do want to stay on the issue of the private sector. So you quite closely follow these work streams that was established by the president in the presidency, with bringing in people like Neil Fruneman, the CEO of Sibanye, and Yanni Durant, the CEO of Remgro, and other big captains of industry to assist the government. I think that ship has sailed. I think there's been a realization that the private sector simply has to step in for the sake of all of South Africa. I'm interested in the successes you have seen so far or not, specifically in rail, because we know the amount of damage that has done to our economy. Are you positive about what you've seen so far?
Look, I'm positive in that at least there's an intervention. You know, this time last year there wasn't an intervention and there wasn't a plan. But we haven't actually seen the volumes improving much. I think Transnet are saying, you know, they've improved the volumes by 1 million tons in the fourth quarter of 2023. That's not enough of a step change, you know. So, but where I am positive is that, you know, I think this is all going to precipitate quite a big change in the way that logistics, especially rail freight logistics, is run, and that you will see the private sector coming in to make the investments, to take over the concessions, to do those things. But that is all long. These things take time. They're difficult to put in place. They're complicated. They involve lots and lots of money and lots of contracting, and so there isn't going to be like a quick fix. So I think, you know, help is on the way, but we're not going to feel it for a little while.
And how does Ramaphosa think about these interventions? Because it's pretty embarrassing, right? It's pretty embarrassing having to admit that your SOE Transnet has failed, has collapsed, cannot function without the intervention of the private sector. But he's somehow very proud also about pulling this off, and we'll probably hear about it tonight.
Look, it's a strange thing that the ANC does. You know, they kind of don't they don't take responsibility. You know, so when there's a problem, they are almost amazed to say, well, there's a problem. And then you know, not that the problem, we caused the problem, or, you know, the problem's a result of how we ran this entity. So it's a kind of strange like arm's length sort of, oh, there's a problem. We're going to address it.
And that's why some of the successes that you're going to hear about tonight is going to be completely devoid of context. For example, NASFAS, there is a huge corruption scandal going on. 5 billion rand has disappeared from NASPA's, and no one knows where it went to.
We've got a clue. The top brass has been suspended.
But I mean,
Konita, we now see the president's vehicles, his cavalcade, approaching not Parliament but the City Hall, because Parliament has still not been fixed. It wasn't fixed. What was that word we used earlier? Intermittently. Quickly.
Imminently.
Not intermittently. It is being fixed intermittently, sorry. So we see the president's cavalcade approaching the City Hall. We see a phalanx of Cape Town City police officers on motorcycles. We see horses, we see flags, and President Cyril Ramaphosa and the First Lady will soon make their appearance. We saw earlier the Speaker of Parliament, Nosiviwe Mapisa and Ngakula, as well as Mr. Amos Masondo, the chair of the National Council of Provinces, making their way into Parliament. And we see a very happy Navy band performing on stage. They don't have load shedding, they're singing their lungs out, being very happy, singing for the president. So things are happening in Parliament. About 14 minutes left before we hear this year's State of the Nation, and we're going to start to wrap. Konita Hunter, speaking of slowness, one of my personal passions, of course, is the criminal justice sector, and specifically our fight or not fight against corruption. In 2019, this president announced the establishment of the new Scorpions. Okay,
Yes.
That is now 5 years ago. As we sit here, the bill to establish the ID, the Investigating Directorate, as a permanent anti-corruption body has not yet been passed.
and that is exactly it. The sluggishness in the execution of a big, ambitious reform agenda. And so what you then present to the electorate is, but the paper, here's my intentions, or, yes, you don't have the groceries, but I wrote the shopping list. That is the equivalent of what you're going to the electorate for. And I think 2019, 2020, 2021, it's coming, and people were kind of at the edges of their seat every time there was a conviction, but then, case, not a conviction and arrest, but then it doesn't lead to a conviction. In 5 years, we don't have that picture, that picture that's going to say, corruption has been dealt with. That precedent setting, kind of we were tough on corruption, and so yes, it was very, very good that we saw Brian Molefe in the dock, and you saw so many other high-level arrests. But at the same time, the ID has bungled significant cases, Estina being one of them, and so. I do think that the criminal justice system is by no means as compelled out as what it was in 2017 and 2018. It's come a long way. I don't think you have that manifest rogue element in the top echelons of our criminal justice system. It gives me confidence. But is that enough to inspire confidence from ordinary South Africans in the rule of law in South Africa? I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, and I think by now the majority of the country would have expected at least one conviction of those state capture characters, as you've mentioned earlier, that Judge Zondo had pointed out in his many reports. And yet we don't have one. We don't have one conviction on state capture. And that blame shouldn't only go to the MPA, right? Because the MPA cannot prosecute if the police doesn't do their work. And if Parliament or the President or the law advisors don't pass these bills in time to actually give proper investigative powers to the ID as they've asked for 5 years ago.
Someone, came up with this really good imagery. It's like when you have a burst pipe, how fast you close the tap matters, because you need to stop the flooding, right? And so if you are late to closing the tap, essentially you're going to have a flooded house. So you have a broken tap and a flooded house. And I think that's the problem of the Ramaphosa administration, is that you announce that you're going to stop the leak, but then you just kind of let it gush out. And now you're dealing with damp everywhere and a flooded house. And that, for me, I think is harder to undo.
President Ramaphosa has now stepped up to the podium, to the little arch there outside City Hall. The Air Force Gripens are flying over the Media 24 Center, over the City Hall. The President is flanked by the Speaker, Mapisa Ngakula, also Amos Masondo, the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces. They are making their way up to the stage for the 21 gun salute that will follow. We'll then hear the national anthem being played before the President makes his way into the Cape Town City Hall to deliver his State of the Nation address. Carol, we have a big crime problem in South Africa still, and a lot of it, can be blamed on the past, on the legacy of the apartheid police system, on the system of apartheid that, really made crime almost an essential part of survival for a large part of the population. The ANC, for example, had to work underground and establish these smuggling networks to survive in exile. But it's 30 years later. We still have a crime rate of 75 murders per day. And it seems like Bheki Cele is untouchable as police minister, and maybe another example of someone who's clearly failing at his KPI, as Quinita said to us earlier. But, he's not going anywhere soon.
Look, I think what's worse than just having, crime, and the fact that we've still got crime, is the fact that organized crime has really taken hold of South Africa. And you see it in every sector. And to get, to unroot that organized crime is a very different thing to just, stopping people from murdering each other at taverns or robbing each other, on payday. I think think that Becky Cele especially is not equipped to strategize and deal with this problem. You don't see any strategic thinking or approach coming out of that office. In fact, what you see is he seems to think that his role should be going to visit the crime scene and commiserating with the victims, rather than actually, strategizing a proper approach to policing.
So, I mean, he was asked a few moments ago, but, as he was walking into Parliament, about the crisis with the call center, the 10311, where you just can't get hold, and it's in absolute shambles. And he says, don't worry, it'll be fixed in a week. That type of nonchalant, lackadaisical, even pompous responses to real human crisis, where people who are victims of violent crimes get no response from the state, is for me at the center of why people are losing faith, not only in a single political party, but in democracy, and that's more dangerous.
Kunita, I quickly want to spend a few minutes on the opposition. We spoke about the EFF, but the DA is the official opposition, the second largest party in South Africa. What will they think? How will they listen to tonight's speech with the mind fixed on their response to the speech next week?
I think what we've seen from the DA and most opposition parties is that this speech matters very little, and they don't have a lot of expectations like in the past. They would come with this list of, we want the president to address this and this and this, and they've just said we don't think he's capable actually, and so we have no expectation. And so a lot of it is going to be not so much on what Ramaphosa says, but what we can do, because that's what the DA is going to kind of strategize and angle their response to Ramaphosa is, well, we can do it better. And using the Western Cape as an example, and using their responses to alleviate the impacts of load shedding as one example, to say, if we did this nationally, South Africa would be in a much better position.
Carol Payton, last question to you before we switch over to the State of the Nation address. The President's now entering the City Hall. The unions and business, we haven't mentioned the phrase social compact once during this discussion, which probably means it's dead, rest in peace, social compact. But how will they be listening to tonight? Is there any surprises you think that they might be looking for?
No, I think that business are looking for an acknowledgement of their role, and an acknowledgement that will continue. I think for the trade unions, they're in a really difficult position because they support the ANC, well, especially COSATU supports the ANC as its ally. But their members and their communities are under real pressure. So they would like to see, they'd like to see the base, that 350 grant made permanent and increased. They'd like to see those sorts of initiatives. But yeah, so yeah, they always have high expectations and almost always are, unfortunately,
disappointed. We will go there to Parliament. We have journalists outside Parliament. We will speak to all of them afterwards and ask them what they thought of the speech. What we will not be hearing tonight, according to my esteemed colleagues, is Alina State, the list of convicted corruption convicts, the end of load shedding, the implementation of the Zondo report, the end of cadre deployment, and the final end or launching of SAA with its new partner. Unfortunately, that will probably not follow in the speech tonight. Thank you very much, Carol Payton and Quinita Hunter, for joining me.
I'm going to Parliament now.
Quinita's on her way to Parliament. Carol and I are going to listen to the speech. We'll publish our analysis on News24. Please stay tuned to News24 tonight. We will comment throughout the speech. We will fact check, we will analyze, we will opine, and we will keep you up to date with the latest news. Thank you so much for joining us, and goodbye.
basebenze ngakudikhandla bafikile kuma semi-finals ngaphansi kwahulumende wethu sibonile ukuthi bantu baseningizimu Afrika banawo emakhono ngingayikhohlwa njani indzaba yema-Grammy Awards ngoba sibabonile baqulu baseningizimu Afrika bavela baphakamisa umjeko wethu singama-Afrika kwathi manje ngoba nemculo loletha indondo ekhathi ekhaya halala ma-Afrika konke lokhu kuyenteka ngaphansi kwesandla somengameli wethu mengameli Cyril Ramaphosa. Ngivumeleni ngithi baholi bethu kusukela phasi kwamasipala kuyofika kumengameli bethu sithi bayekeleni banibeke emabala ngoba ingwe idla ngemabala siyanqoba lo mnyaka batawuvuma bayekeleni lo nyaka halala Sona 2024 halala halala South Africa halala halala Mengameli Cyril Ramaphosa halala lonyaka masingo ahe matamela ahe Songondlo ngingumthenzelo ohlaba usamila imfuthane lebulala ngaphandle kwesikhali imamba lehlatane lengabona bulawe loshikitela ngetinyawo nejahembi ngoba kukuthi emuva ngiwasempumalanga ngingiphumalanga siko sesithuthelane ngebuhle ngaphasi kwamake premier referendumseni ngiwasenzaweni yasenkomazi ingani ngingaphasi kwamengameli wesineke mengameli Cyril Ramaphosa ngingosatane nziwe ngibide ngisabele ngisonzile
There will be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Please be seated. Order. Order, honorable members. Honorable members, the President has called this joint sitting of the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces in terms of Section 842D of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, read with Joint Rule 13(1)A, to deliver his State of the Nation address to Parliament. Honorable members, before I invite the President to address this joint sitting, I wish to remind all of us that in December last year, amendments to the Joint Rules of Parliament were agreed in respect of Chapter 2 of the Joint Rules, specifically Parts 1 and 2, which deal with order in joint sittings and the rules of debate. In this regard, I wish to highlight the following: that the rules provide that no other business may be considered during a joint sitting other than the specified business for which the joint sitting was called. Rule 15(3) provides that no member may interrupt the President whilst delivering the State of the Nation address. In terms of Joint Rule 5(7), a point of order must be confined only to a matter of breach of these joint rules or parliamentary procedure or practice or a matter relating to unparliamentary conduct and must be raised immediately when the alleged breach occurs. The member raising the point of order must refer to a rule or standing order, or at the least the principle or subject matter upon which the point of order is being based. A member wishing to raise a question of privilege must report it to the Speaker or Chairperson without delay in accordance with Joint Rule 5(8). If the alleged breach of privilege is, in the opinion of the Speaker or the Chairperson, adequately substantiated and may affect a joint sitting of the House on the day or in the immediate future, The Speaker or the Chairperson may, in due regard to the provisions of the Act, rule on the matter and announce it in the joint sitting. If the alleged breach of privilege does not directly affect the joint sitting of the Houses in the immediate future, the Speaker or the Chairperson may refer the matter to the relevant committee of the House to which affected member belongs. Rule 38 stipulates that whenever the presiding officer addresses members during a joint sitting, any member then speaking or seeking to speak must resume his or her seat, and the presiding officer must be heard without interruption. Rule 52 provides that no member shall use unparliamentary, offensive, abusive, insulting, disrespectful, unbecoming language or sounds or offensive or threatening gestures. Rule 57 provides that rulings by presiding officers are final and binding and may not be challenged or questioned in the House. In terms of Joint Rule 8, a member who willfully fails or refuses to obey any joint rule or order or resolution may be found guilty of contempt of Parliament. As members are aware, the rules are there to protect the dignity and decorum of the House and to ensure that business before the Houses of Parliament is conducted in an orderly manner. Rule 41 states that if the presiding officer is of the opinion that a member is deliberately contravening a provision of these rules, or that a member is disregarding the authority of the chair, or that of a member's conduct is grossly disorderly, the presiding officer may order the member to leave the chamber immediately for the remainder of the sitting. I now call the Honourable, the President, to address the joint sitting.
Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Nosiviwe Mapisa Ngagula, Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Mr. Amos Masondo, Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. Paul Mashatile, and Mrs. Mashatile, former President Thabo Mbeki, former Deputy President Zile Mlambo Ngcuka, former Speaker of the National Assembly, Ms. Baleka Mbete, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, Deputy Chief Justice Ms. Mandisa Maya, various justices who are here present, Mayor of Cape Town, Councillor Gordon Hill-Lewis, Dean of the Diplomatic Corps and Regional Deans, the heads of institutions supporting our democracy, eminent persons representing our 9 provinces who I just greeted a few minutes ago, members of Parliament and fellow South Africans. As we were preparing this State of the Nation address, we were deeply saddened to hear of the tragic passing of Dr. Hage Geingob, the President of the Republic of Namibia. President Geingob was a dear friend to me and to the people of South Africa, and a comrade in arms in the struggle for our freedom. He was a champion of African peace, unity, progress, and development. May I ask that we observe a moment of silence in his honor as we remember him by rising. Thank you. This State of the Nation address takes place in the 30th year of our democracy. On the 27th of April 1994, millions of South Africans cast their ballot in a democratic election, many for the very first time in their lives. That momentous day was the culmination of centuries of struggle, the struggle to liberate our people from suffering, from dispossession, oppression, exploitation, and poverty and inequality. As we stood in the long, winding queues to vote, we turned to one another and spoke of our joy, and sometimes with tears running down our cheeks. We embraced friends and strangers alike, encouraged by a sense of a common future that we were about to determine for our country with our votes. We placed into those ballot boxes not just a vote, but a dream of the country we wanted to build. It was the dream of a South Africa that, in every sense, belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. The world watched as Nelson Mandela, the father of our nation, cast his vote in Inanda in KwaZulu-Natal, the land of Ushaka, a hero whose name echoes across the ages, the birthplace of John Langalibalele Dube, the first president of the African National Congress. An organization which united the African people, and the home of Chief Albert Luthuli, the first African Nobel Peace Laureate. In many ways, his voting in Inanda, at the place where John Langalibalele Dube is buried, was symbolic, because through casting his vote there, he was reporting back to the first president of the ANC on how far the struggle had been prosecuted. After casting his ballot, Madiba said, "This is the beginning of a new era. We have moved from an era of pessimism, division, limited opportunities, turmoil, and conflict. We are starting a new era of hope, reconciliation, and nation building." It is this dream of a free and united people that is woven into our democratic constitution. It is this constitution that has guided our collective efforts over the last 3 decades to fundamentally change our country for the better, and it must stand at the center of the work that we do now to build a better life for all our people. Over the last 3 decades, we have been on a journey striving together to achieve a new society, a national democratic society. We have cast off the tyranny of apartheid and built a democratic state based on the will of the people. We have established strong institutions to protect the fundamental freedoms and human rights of all our people. We have transformed the lives of millions of South Africans, providing the necessities of life and creating opportunities that never existed for them before. We have enabled a diverse economy whose minerals, whose agricultural products and manufactured goods are exported and reach every corner of the world while creating jobs in our own country. As a country, we have returned to the community of nations, extending a hand of peace and friendship to all countries and all peoples. Just as we cannot deny the progress South Africans have made over the last 30 years, nor should we diminish the severe challenges that we continue to face as a people. We have endured times of great difficulty when the strength of our constitutional democracy has been severely tested. There have been times when events beyond our borders have held back our progress. The global financial crisis of 2007 and 2008 brought to an end a decade of strong growth and faster job creation. More recently, the Russia-Ukraine conflict has contributed to rising prices of fuel, food, and other commodities across the world, and has, as a result, made life more difficult for all South Africans. There have also been times when events at home have shaken the foundations of our constitutional democracy. Perhaps the greatest damage was caused during the era of state capture. For a decade, individuals at the highest levels of the state conspired with private individuals to take over and repurpose state-owned enterprises, law enforcement agencies, and other public institutions. In some cases, these activities were enabled by local and multinational companies. Billions of rands that were meant to meet the needs of ordinary South Africans were stolen. Confidence in our country was badly eroded. Public institutions were severely weakened. The effects of state capture continue to be felt across society, from the shortage of freight locomotives to crumbling public services, from poor performance of our power stations to failed development projects in a number of places. But South Africans, including many honest and dedicated public servants, fought back and worked together to defeat state capture. Even then, attempts to thwart the country's recovery continued. We recall with great anguish the events of July 2021, when individuals loyal to their own interests sought to provoke a popular insurrection, leading to a tragic loss of life and widespread destruction. Again, they were unsuccessful. These efforts to undo the hard-won gains of our freedom failed because the people of South Africa stood firm together in defense of our Constitution and its promise of a better life for all. It was It was the same determination that enabled the country to endure the devastation of COVID-19, the worst global pandemic in over a century. More than 100,000 South Africans lost their lives to the disease, and more than 2 million people lost their jobs. Yet it would have been far worse if we had not acted together as South Africans to stop the spread of the virus, to support our health workers, to protect the most vulnerable, and to roll out an unprecedented vaccination program. We were able to unite society around a common effort to save lives and livelihoods. I want to pay tribute to many thousands of South Africans who made financial contributions to the Solidarity Fund, to the workers who produced medical supplies, and to the nurses, the doctors, and other health workers, to our soldiers and police, who also risked their lives to care for those who were ill. Another major challenge we had to address during this period is gender-based violence and femicide, which we characterized as the second pandemic. As the government, we have introduced laws and directed more resources to prosecuting perpetrators, providing better support to survivors, and promoting women's empowerment at an economic level. As a society, we must intensify our collective efforts to bring together various efforts that are going to bring gender-based violence and femicide to an end. In recent years, the country has had to confront the effects of climate change. We have had devastating wildfires here in the Western Cape, destructive floods in KwaZulu-Natal, unbearable heat waves in the Northern Cape, persistent drought in the Eastern Cape, and intense storms in Gauteng and Northwest. Much of the task of this administration was to get our country through these challenges and to work to regain our way. While each of these events has left its mark, our country has weathered every storm and every challenge that we confronted. Yes, we have the scars to show, but in every case, South Africans have been resolute. We have not only persevered, but we have come back stronger and more determined from all these calamities that befell our country. All these efforts have demonstrated how South Africans value their freedom, a freedom that was won after decades of struggle. The story of the first 30 years of our democracy can best be told through a number of initiatives that have been embarked upon in the 30 years. But I think that the story can best be told through the life of a child who was born at the dawn of our democracy called Tintswalo. Tintswalo, democracy's child, grew up in a society that was worlds apart from the South Africa of her parents, South Africa of her grandparents and great-grandparents. Loko Tintswalo afika ka South Africa, ukume kuri swilo swo tala a swa ha fani na swilo swa khale. ukumekuri swilo leswi endlaku ihulumeni wa hina isona swi nga kota ku ri swi yisa vutomi bya yena pambili. She grew up in a society governed by a constitution rooted in equality, the rule of law, and affirmation of the inherent dignity of every citizen. Tintswalo and many others born at the same time as her were beneficiaries of the first policies of the democratic state to provide free health care for pregnant women and children under the age of 6. Tintswalo's formative years were spent in a house provided by the state, one of millions of houses built to shelter the poor. O ile a re ha tswalwa a hwetša hore dintlo di agiwa ke mmuso o motjha wa South Africa. Ba bang ba ileng ba tswala pele ga ena ba ne ba golela dintlong tsa maratharata, empa yena o ile a re ha tswalwa a hwetša gore mmuso o wa South Africa o agela batho dintlo tse dintšintši. Tintswalo grew up in a household provided with basic water and electricity, in a house where her parents were likely to have lived without electricity before 1994. Ngo-1994, abantu abaningi kulelizwe lakithi bebengenawo ugesi, kodwa uTintswalo uthe makezalwa wathola ukuthi ugesi ukhona ufakwe uhulumeni. Tintswalo was enrolled in a school in which her parents did not have to pay school fees. And each school day, she received nutritious meals as part of a program that today supports 9 million learners from poor families. Hoyu Tintswalo duva achia chikoloni, usika chikoloni ngamacheloni, kazungwe zikolo uwana na breakfast, kazungwe chikolo uwana ziliwa za masiyara. Hezi zoba zisaitei chipingani chakali, zoba zisiho namusi ziwaitea nga uri unamubuso muswa wa Afrika Chipembe uneva kweisa zitupanda. The democratic state provided a child support grant to meet Tintswalo's basic needs. This grant, together with other forms of social assistance, continues to be a lifeline for more than 26 million South Africans every month. With this support, Tintswalo, democracy's child, was able to complete high school. Through the assistance of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, Tintswalo attended one of our TVET colleges and obtained a qualification. When Tintswalo entered the world of work, she was able to progress and thrive with the support of the state's employment equity and black economic empowerment policies. With the income she earned, she was able to save. She was also able to support her parents. She was able to start a family, to move into a better house, and to live a better life. This is the story of millions of people who have been born since the dawn of democracy. Whether people like it or not, this is the reality of many people in our country. But truth be told, it is only part of the story. For despite the remarkable achievements of the last 30 years, many of democracy's children still face great challenges. Millions of young people aged 15 to 24 years are currently not in employment, education, or training. There are many who have a matric, a diploma, or a degree who are not able to find a job or do not have the means to even start a business. Now, this is a trend that prevails in many countries around the world. While economic growth is essential to reduce unemployment, we cannot wait to provide the work that many of democracy's children need. As government, we have taken steps to address the youth unemployment challenge. I had the privilege yesterday to be in the presence of almost 1,000 young people. 1,000 young people who are bearing testimony to how, through the various initiatives that government has put in place, that the private sector has also put in place, have been able to see progress in their own lives. 3 years ago, building on the experience and success of the expanded public works program, we launched the Presidential Employment Stimulus. Through this program, we've been able to create more than 1.7 million work and livelihood opportunities. Through the stimulus, we have placed more than 1 million young people as school assistants in 23,000 schools. If you go around our country and you talk to school principals, you talk to school teachers, they will tell you how beneficial this program has been in assisting them in their schools, but more importantly, how beneficial this program has been to these young people who are being introduced to the world of work. This has provided them with valuable work experience while improving learning outcomes. Through the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention, we have established what we call SA Youth Mobi as a zero-rated platform for unemployed young people to access opportunities for learning and earning. Over 4.3 million people, young people for that matter, are now engaged on the network, and 1.6 million have so far secured opportunities. We have, working together with the National Youth Development Agency, the NYDA, set up a number of initiatives to provide opportunities for young people including the National Youth Service and the Youth Employment Service, where we are cooperating and working with the private sector. A number of companies in our country have signed up to this, as they have seen the need to join in the task of creating job opportunities for young people. These programs matter because work matters to people. The NYDA has played a key role in assisting a number of young people to start their own businesses. Having a job does not only provide an income, it is fundamental to people's sense of self-worth, of dignity, of hope, purpose, and inclusion. From the depths of deprivation and inequality, we have worked over 30 years to ensure that all South Africans have an equal chance to prosper. And we have sought to live up to leaving no one behind. It is not enough to recognize the injustices of the past. We need to correct them. We have introduced laws and undertaken programs to enable Black South Africans who were previously disadvantaged and prevented from getting into many opportunities. We've also enabled women to advance in the workplace, to become owners and managers, to acquire land and to build up assets, even as, because they are women, were prevented by laws of the past from doing so. The proportion of jobs in executive management held by Black people have increased exponentially, almost fivefold between 1996 and 2016. One of the overriding challenges this administration had to deal with when it took office was state capture and corruption. Our first priority was to put a decisive stop to state capture, to dismantle the criminal networks within the state and to ensure that perpetrators face justice. We had to do so. We had to do so that we could restore our institutions and rebuild our economy. We appointed capable people with integrity to head our law enforcement agencies, government departments, security services, and companies, often through an independent and transparent process. The credibility and efficiency of a number of institutions, like the South African Revenue Service, have been restored and their performance has improved. Some may not like this, but that is the reality of what has happened. We set up the Investigating Directorate as a specialized and multidisciplinary unit within the National Prosecuting Authority to investigate corruption and other serious crimes. Great progress has been made in bringing those responsible for all these acts of malfeasance to justice. More than 200 accused persons are being prosecuted as we speak. More are under investigation. Stolen funds are being recovered. Freezing orders, I see you love this. Freezing orders of 14 billion rand have been granted to the NPA's Asset Forfeiture Unit for state capture-related cases, and around 8.6 billion rand in corrupt proceeds have been returned to the state. A restored and revitalized SARS has collected 4.8 billion in unpaid taxes as a result of evidence presented to the State Capture Commission, while the Special Investigating Unit has instituted civil litigation to the value of 64 billion rand. We have taken steps, including through new legislation, to strengthen our ability to prevent fraud and secure our removal from the grey list of the Financial Action Task Force. With the assistance of business, we have set up a digital forensic capability to support the NPA, especially its investigating directorate, which in due course will be expanded to support law enforcement more broadly. Legislation is currently before Parliament to establish the investigating directorate as a permanent entity with full investigating powers. But there is much more work to be done to eradicate corruption completely. Based on the recommendations of the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council, we are determined to introduce further measures to strengthen our anti-corruption agencies, to protect whistleblowers, to regulate lobbying and prevent the undue influence of public representatives in procurement. We will not stop until every person responsible is held to account. We will not stop. We will not stop until all money stolen has been recovered. And yes, we will not stop until even those corporations, blue chip corporations that were involved in state capture, are made to be accountable. The real tragedy of state capture was that it diverted attention and resources away from what government should have been doing, which is to grow our economy and create jobs. Over the past 5 years, we have worked earnestly to revive our economy from a decade of stagnation and to protect it from both domestic and global shocks. We have made progress in a number of ways. Our economy today is 3 times larger than what it was 30 years ago. The number of South Africans who are in employment has increased from 8 million in 1994 to 16.7 million today. Over the last 2 years, the number of jobs being created has been increasing every quarter, and we now have more people in employment than before the pandemic. Yet, our unemployment rate is the highest it has ever been. Even as employment is growing, more people are entering the job market each year than jobs are being created. We have laid a foundation for growth through far-reaching economic reforms that we have embarked upon, an ambitious investment drive and an infrastructure program that is starting to yield results. Companies continue to invest. Thousands of hectares of farmland are being planted. New factories are being opened and production is being expanded. We are on track to resolve the most important constraints on economic growth by stabilizing our energy supply and fixing our logistics system. As these obstacles are removed, the true potential of our economy will be unleashed. We set out a clear plan to end load shedding, which we have been implementing with a single-minded focus through the National Energy Crisis Committee. We have delivered on our commitments to bring substantial new power through private investment on the grid, which is already helping to reduce load shedding. Last year, we implemented a major debt relief package, which will enable Eskom to make investments in maintenance and transmission infrastructure and ensure its sustainability going forward. Since we revived our renewable energy program 5 years ago, we have connected more than 2,500 megawatts of solar and wind power to the grid, with 3 times this amount already in procurement or construction. Through tax incentives and financial support, we have more than doubled the amount of rooftop solar capacity installed across the country in just the past year. We have implemented sweeping regulatory reforms to enable private investment in electricity generation, with more than 120 new private energy projects that are now in development. These are phenomenal developments that are driving the restructuring of our electricity sector in line with many other economies have done to increase competitiveness and to bring down their energy prices. Through all these actions, we are confident that the worst is behind us and the end of load shedding is finally within reach. But we are not stopping there. To ensure that we never face a similar crisis ever again, we are reforming our energy system to make it more competitive, more sustainable, and reliable into the future. We are going to build more than 14,000 kilometers of new transmission lines to accommodate renewable energy over the coming years. To fast-track this process, we will enable investment in transmission infrastructure through a variety of innovative investment models. Re tla ya mo bao ba nang le tšhelete. Re ba bitse gore ba tle ba tlo sebetsana le rona ka go kenya ditšhelete tsa bona mo transmission ya motlakase. Go etsetsa gore transmission ya rona e tie. Last year we tabled the Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill to support the restructuring of Eskom and establish a competitive electricity market. As we undertake these reforms, we are positioning our economy for the future growth in a world shaped by climate change and a revolution in green technologies. In the last 3 years, our country has seen the increase in extreme weather events, often with disastrous consequences. This is why we are implementing a just energy transition, not only to reduce carbon emissions and fight climate change, but to create growth and jobs for our people in the future. We will undertake this transition at a pace, at a scale, and at a cost that our country can afford, and in a manner that ensures energy security. So we will not be compelled to embark on processes that are going to disadvantage our country in this regard. With our abundance of solar, wind and mineral resources. We are going to create thousands of jobs in renewable energy, in green hydrogen, green steel, electric vehicles and other green products. The Northern Cape, with its optimal solar conditions, one of the very best in the world conditions, has already attracted billions of rands in investment. We are going to set up a special economic zone in the Bukhubai port to drive investment in green energy. There's a great deal of interest already from the private sector, with companies such as Sasol and many others who are ready to participate in the boom that will be generated through our green hydrogen energy projects. We have decided to support electric vehicle manufacturing in our country to grow our automotive sector, which provides good jobs to thousands of workers. And in this regard, we are already at an advanced stage of cooperating with our neighbors, with countries such as the DRC, which is well endowed with critical minerals, with countries such as Botswana, which is already involved in parts of the value chain of automotive manufacturing. With all these countries, we are going to be able to form an incredibly powerful ecosystem that is going to enable all of us to benefit from the green energy revolution. We have decided to give special focus to regions such as Mpumalanga to enable the creation of new industries, new economic opportunities and sustainable jobs. And in the past year, we have increased the financing pledges for our Just Energy Transition Investment Plan from around 170 billion rand to almost 240 billion rand. Now, to address the persistent effects of global warming, which manifests itself through persistent floods, fires and droughts, we have decided to establish a climate change response fund. This will bring together all spheres of government and the private sector in a collaborative effort to build our resilience and respond to the impacts of climate change. Now, this decision was inspired by the persistent calamities that we are subjected to. Almost every year, KwaZulu-Natal experiences massive floods that destroy our infrastructure. Yes, the Western Cape is suffering from wildfires that continue to destroy quite a number of assets in our country. And indeed, many other provinces are actually suffering from the effects of climate change. So this fund, which we hope will gain the attraction of all, like the fund we set up during COVID, will support various areas that suffer from climate change to deal with severe inefficiencies in our freight logistics. We are taking action to improve our ports and rail network and restore them to world-class standards. We have set out a clear roadmap to stabilize the performance of Transnet and reform our logistics system. Working closely with business and labor, we have established dedicated teams to turn around 5 strategic corridors that transport our goods for export purposes. The number of ships waiting to berth at the Port of Durban which has experienced severe congestion in recent months, has reduced from more than 60 ships in mid-November to just 12 ships at the end of January. Now, that represents progress. Transnet has appointed an international terminal operator to help expand and improve its largest terminal at the Port of Durban. And we are overhauling the freight rail system by allowing private rail operators to access the rail network. With the current conflict in the Middle East affecting shipping traffic through the Suez Canal, South Africa is well positioned to offer bunkering services for ships that will be rerouted via our shores. We completed, as we all know, the auction of broadband spectrum after more than a decade of delays, resulting in new investment, lower data costs, and improved network reach and quality. Now, these reforms have a profound impact in a society in which access to the internet has risen dramatically over the last decade. Less than half of all households had internet access in 2011, compared to 79% of households in 2022, meaning that South Africans more and more are using the internet. Some use it to trade, some use it to improve their livelihoods, some use it to learn, but the internet is being spread more and more, even in our rural areas. Just this week, we published new regulations to reform our visa system, which will make it easier to attract the skills that our economy needs and create a dynamic ecosystem for innovation as well as entrepreneurship. We raised 1.5 trillion rand in new investment commitments through 5 South African investment conferences, of which over 500 billion has already flown into the economy. To support growth in the mining sector, we are moving ahead with the modernization of our mining rights licensing system and are launching an exploration fund to support emerging miners and exploit new mineral deposits. Through this, mining, which has been the bedrock on which the South African economy was built, will once again become a sunrise industry. Participation of previously disadvantaged black people is increasing. Black ownership now stands at approximately 39% when compared to just 2% in 2004. This is progress that is being made, allowing black people to participate in a key industry in our economy. Investment in infrastructure is gaining momentum. New and innovative funding mechanisms will be utilized to increase construction of infrastructure. The Minister of Finance announced this in his medium-term policy budget statement last year, where he said, we are now going to be able, yes, to fund infrastructure through utilization of innovative new methods. It could be build, operate, and transfer. It could be embarking on investment vehicles as well as investment ideas that will enable us to speed up the construction of infrastructure. The Department of Water and Sanitation aims to enhance water resource management by initiating infrastructure projects to secure water supply and diversifying water sources to reduce dependence on surface water. Water being such a major challenge in our country, this is actually answering to the need of our people just to have water. Vanhu vo tala la Afrika Dzonga va vulavula hi mati, va tshama va hi byela ku ri mati a va na wona, va lava ku ri hi endla ku ri mati a va kona. Bulk water projects are under construction across the country to improve water supply to millions of residents in villages, towns, and cities. The following water infrastructure projects are now in progress or have been completed. The Lesotho Highlands Water Project, which is going to invest up to 40 billion rand, is now in progress. Umzimvubu, that we've been talking about for years, has now commenced. Hazelmere Dam, Umkomazi Water Project, Clan William Dam, Tzanini Dam, Loscom, Madakazi, pipeline from Jozini Dam, Giyani, pipeline from Nandoni Dam to Nsami Dam, Pilansbeck Water, Val Haramahara, and the pipeline from the Val River to Hotazel. Now, all these are projects that are underway or have been completed. In the Eastern Cape, the Msikaba and the Mtento bridges are beginning to rise over the landscape and will be among the highest in Africa once completed. So if you want to find the highest bridge in Africa, you will have to go to the Eastern Cape. The steel used, now the steel used for part of the project is fabricated in Mpumalanga, and the iron ore comes from the Northern Cape. In the past 5 years, Sanral, which manages nearly 25,000 kilometers of road, has awarded more than 1,200 projects to the value of 120 billion rand, meaning that the focus on constructing our roads, repairing our roads, yes, even attending to our potholes, is now underway. Yes, it is. Now, you talk to the Premier of the Eastern Cape, he will tell you that many of the roads in the Eastern Cape are now being attended to. Similarly, when you talk to the Premier of the Northern Cape, he will tell you the same. Yes, in November last year, now listen to this one. In November last year, Cabinet approved a framework for high-speed rail, focusing initially on the Johannesburg to Durban corridor. As we grow the economy, we are making it more inclusive through redistribution. Around 25% of farmland in our country is now owned by black South Africans. And this has been confirmed by an eminent agricultural economist, Wandile Sihlobo. This brings us closer to achieving our target of 30% by 2030. And he says to me, President, we will have exceeded this target by 2030 because a number of initiatives are now underway to ensure that black South Africans have access to the ownership of land. In the last 5 years, we have supported around 1,000 black industrialists with funding and other forms of support. These black-owned firms employ more than 90,000 workers and contribute many billions of rands to our economy. Now, this is the revolution that is underway to bring more and more black people into the real economy. At the same time, about 200,000 more workers obtained ownership of shares in the companies that they work for, bringing the total worker ownership in companies in the South African economy to well over 500,000 workers. We see this trend continuing to grow as more and more companies realize that it is beneficial to their own operations and their businesses that their workers should have a stake in the businesses that they work for. And we call upon the private sector to go ahead and increase the participation of their workers in the businesses that they work for. The reforms that we have initiated and the work that is underway will enable us, yes, as I said, to improve our logistics system, to achieve water security, and ultimately it will lead to the creation of jobs. While our challenges have never been greater, our response to these challenges will lead us to greater prosperity than we have ever known. One of the worst injustices of apartheid was the manner in which education was used as a tool to perpetuate inequality and exploitation of black people. Over the 30 years, we have sought to use education as a tool to create equality and to empower our people. Our basic education outcomes are steadily improving across a range of measures. The latest matric pass rate at 82.9% is the highest ever achieved. And we congratulate the matriculants of 2023 for achieving this incredible pass rate. And with each new year, learners from no-fee schools are accounting for more and more bachelor passes that are achieved. And as I have often said, this is the silent revolution that is underway, that the children of the poorest parents in our country are now able to produce pass rates that are equal, that are even beginning to surpass the pass rates that you find in former Model C schools, in your independent schools as well. This is the progress that we've been longing to see in our education system. At the same time, fewer learners are dropping out of school. We have increased funding for poor and working class students in universities and TVET colleges significantly over the past 5 years. Over the next 5 years, we will focus our attention on expanding access to early childhood development and improving early grade learning and reading, where we are already beginning to see progress. Moving early childhood development to the Department of Basic Education was one of the most important decisions that we have taken, as we are now able to devote more resources to early childhood development and ensure that through cooperative governance, various departments of government do get involved in the childhood development programs augmented and led by the Department of Basic Education. Our policies and programs have, over the course of 30 years, lifted millions of people out of dire poverty. Today, fewer South Africans go hungry and fewer live in poverty. In 1993, South Africa faced a significant poverty challenge, with 71.1% of its population living in poverty. However, under the democratic government, there has been a consistent decline in these numbers. By 2010, the poverty rate had dropped to 60.9%, and it continued to decrease, reaching 55.5% in 2020, as reported by the World Bank. Now, this progress has been made possible by extensive support to those in society who need it most. 5 years ago, we introduced a further measure to tackle poverty by introducing the national minimum wage as envisaged in the Freedom Charter. The decision by key role players, they being business and labor and communities, they took a decision to introduce the national minimum wage. And this has immediately raised the wages of over 6 million workers who support their families. In the midst of the pandemic, we introduced the special SRD grant, which currently reaches some 9 million unemployed people every month. We have seen the benefits of this grant and will extend it and improve it as the next step towards income support for the unemployed. These grants and subsidies do much more than give people what they need to live. They are an investment in the future. Many people tend to dismiss this and say we are establishing a dependent society. We are investing in our people and investing in their future as well. Social assistance has shown to increase school enrollment and attendance. It has also shown to lower dropout rates, and it has also improved pass rates. This is what social assistance to our people does. South Africans today are living longer than ever before. Life expectancy has increased from 54 years in 2003 to 65 years in 2023. The World Health Organization, DG, says this is a phenomenal development, because many countries do not just move from a 55 years of life expectancy to 65. Maternal and infant deaths have declined dramatically. We have built more hospitals and clinics, especially in poor areas, providing better quality of care to more South Africans. We are building new hospitals, and one of those, which is a state-of-the-art type of hospital, is the Limpopo Academic Hospital, which is currently under construction as we speak. Now, I had, anecdotally, a good representation of how our healthcare system has been improving. When the ANC held its anniversary birthday, there was a bus accident where 5 people passed away and scores were injured. They were taken to our hospitals in Mpumalanga and in Limpopo. Now, I went to see some of them, and when they were asked that, don't you want to move to a private hospital because you are on a private medical aid as a result of your job or whatever, many of them said no. We are being well looked after here. Now, I see you love this. Now, this is what I experienced in just talking to those people who were lying in bed, who were injured, who testified that they were being well looked after in rural hospitals in Limpopo and in Mpumalanga. Today, 95 persons diagnosed with HIV know their status. 79% of those receive antiretroviral treatment, and 93 of those are virally suppressed. New HIV infections among young people have declined significantly, and yet while our health system has had great impact on people's lives, we are working to improve both the quality of healthcare and equality of access. The National Health Insurance Bill has been passed by this House, both houses, and that will provide free health care at the point of care for all South Africans, whether in the public or private health facilities. Now, the bill has arrived on my desk. I'm going through the bill. Yes, I'm looking for a pen. I'm looking for a pen. We plan to incrementally implement the NHI, dealing with issues like the health system financing, the health workforce, medical products, vaccines, and technologies, and health information systems. One of the most visible, impactful, and meaningful achievements of the first 3 decades of freedom has been in providing homes to our people. Today, nearly 9 out of every 10 households live in a formal dwelling, as said by the Statistician General. Where there were once shacks and mud houses with thatch roof, there are now homes of brick and mortar. There are homes with water to drink and to wash with, homes with electricity for lighting and cooking. At the end of apartheid, only 6 out of 10 people had access to clean water. Today, the figure has increased to nearly 9 out of 10 South Africans. We are working to ensure that subsidized housing is located close to work, close to education and other services. But for services to be delivered, local government has to work. Now, when it comes to housing, we are also embarking on new and innovative funding mechanisms. We have tested this in the Northern Cape, where we are doing what we call front-loading. And we launched together with Premier Zamani Sol a project that will result in 4,500 houses for R1 billion funded through the Development Bank of South Africa. Now, this is an innovative way, and we are now putting into practice these new methods of funding infrastructure to enable us to ramp up infrastructure so that the infrastructure build can power our economy and create more jobs. Too many municipalities are failing on governance, financial and service delivery measures. These constraints affect every aspect of our people's daily lives. We have started the implementation of a number of measures to address this problem by providing support to local government, including professionalizing the civil service and ensuring that people with the right skills and the appropriate capability are appointed to key positions. That people are not appointed because they know so and so and so and so. The Presidency, the National Treasury, and COCTA are working together to enhance technical capacity in local government and to improve planning, coordination, as well as fiscal oversight. Now, through the presidential imbizos that we have held across the country, we have seen how the district development model has brought together all spheres of government and key stakeholders to address the service delivery challenges in communities. The district development model has proven to be an effective instrument to enhance cooperative governance and collaboration. Through this model, we are breaking down the silos that we often find in government, where we enhance government departments working together and all layers of government also working together, adhering to what is set out in our Constitution. We will continue to broaden and deepen this process. Tackling crime and insecurity is a key priority. South Africans deserve to live in a safe environment, to walk freely without fear in their neighborhoods and public spaces. During this administration, we have focused on equipping our law enforcement agencies, which had been systematically weakened, to do their work effectively. We have strengthened the ranks of the police through the recruitment of 20,000 police officers, as I announced in the past two Sonas over the last 2 years. And another 10,000 will be recruited in this year as well. An extra 5,000 police officers have been deployed to public order policing. The South African Police Service has launched a very effective operation or initiative, which is Operation Chanela, as a new approach to target crime hotspots, which has resulted in over 285,000 arrests since May last year. The economic infrastructure task teams that are operational in all provinces have had important successes in combating cable theft, damage to critical infrastructure, as well as illegal mining. Through close collaboration with the private sector, we have seen a reduction in security incidents on the rail network. We launched the new Border Management Authority last year to improve the security of our borders and have already stopped well over 100,000 people who tried to enter our country illegally. Together with the civil society, we developed the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence. Together with civil society and as a society-wide response to this pandemic, around 21 billion rand has been dedicated over the medium term to the implementation of the 6 pillars of the plan, including the economic empowerment of women. New laws were introduced to strengthen the response to the criminal justice system, gender-based violence, and provide better support to survivors of such violence. Our ultimate goal is to end gender-based violence altogether by mobilizing all of society. And as part of this, we support the call for a pledge that men in South Africa should be invited to sign, to take and demonstrate, to ensure that they demonstrate their personal commitment to ending this scourge. Now, this initiative of signing a pledge was initiated by young boys at a school called Benedict. They have drafted a pledge that men should commit and sign to. And we discussed it at the Cabinet Lekgotla and felt that we collectively as the men of South Africa as well, taking our cue from young boys at the school, should also be mobilized to sign this pledge. Women are also drafting their own pledge, which will speak to the issues of women and their experiences on gender-based violence. This pledge, yes, will be flighted publicly, and I will be, and the Deputy President and everyone else in Cabinet will be the first to sign this pledge. We still have a long way to go to build safer communities, to prevent violent crime, and protect our infrastructure. But there is no doubt that a professional, well-trained and properly resourced police force working closely with our communities will make our country a safer place. And it is therefore a further call for the setting up of community policing forums that should be effective, which we as government have committed to fund. Today, every South African can hold their heads high, confident that we have assumed our rightful place on the world stage. We remain committed to playing a constructive role on our continent and around the world for the realization of a better Africa and a better world. We will continue to play an important role to silence the guns throughout our continent. Our engagement with the parties in the Russia-Ukraine conflict through the Africa Peace Initiative are progressing. We engage in these peace efforts because we believe that even the most intractable conflicts can be brought to an end through negotiations. Guided by the fundamental principle of human rights and freedom, we have taken up the Palestinians' cause to prevent further deaths and destructions in Gaza. We know that there are some in our nation who do not support this course that we have embarked upon. We have welcomed the ruling of the International Court of Justice that Israel must take all measures within its power to prevent acts of genocide against Palestinians. And we condemn the killing of civilians on all sides and call on all parties involved in the conflict to commit to a peace process that will deliver a two-state solution as resolved by the United Nations. We will use our foreign policy to pursue our development goals. During our leadership of BRICS last year, we witnessed a new chapter for BRICS, the BRICS family of countries. The expansion of the group from 5 to 10 countries presents opportunities for trade and a strengthening of political and diplomatic ties between countries in the global south. We will build on the progress we have made in establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area, which will transform South Africa's economy and that of the continent by creating new jobs and increasing economic participation across our continent. And we will place Africa's development at the top of the agenda when we, as South Africa, host the G20 next year in 2025. The achievements over the last 3 decades are a testament to the power of collaboration and partnership to address our most pressing challenges. Our country has a vibrant civil society, a powerful union movement, and an engaged private sector. Over the last 5 years, we have worked with these social partners to address challenges such as to keep people safe and to distribute vaccines during the COVID-19 pandemic and to mobilize a society-wide response to gender-based violence. In the past year, we have come together with our social partners to end load shedding, to address the challenges in the logistics sector, to tackle crime and corruption, and to also accelerate job creation. This is the South African way of building a social compact, working together on tangible issues, and it will be the key to building a new society in the years to come. This is the last State of the Nation address of the 6th Democratic Administration. NgesiZulu kunelizwi elithi sizawubuya. Futhi sizawuthi masibuyile abantu bazothi ibuyile ngoba izoba ibuyile ngempela. Labo abangathi bayajabula uma ngithi this is the last State of the Nation address, bacabanga ukuthi asinawubuya, sizawubuya khona la kule ndawo. The last 5 years have been a period of recovery, rebuilding and renewal. We have had to revitalize our economy after more than a decade of poor economic performance. We have had to rebuild our public institutions after the era of state capture. We have had to recover from a devastating global pandemic that caused great misery and hardship, that closed businesses and cost our nation many jobs and lives. And we have had to confront and overcome a debilitating electricity crisis that, despite significant improvement in recent months, continues to hold back our economy. We have come a long way in the last 5 years. We have built on the achievements of the last 3 decades, and we have taken decisive measures to address the immediate challenges facing South Africans. We have restored the independence and capability of our law enforcement agencies to tackle corruption and crime. We have worked to advance the rights of persons with disability. We took great pride in making South African Sign Language the 12th official language of our country. We have safeguarded and promoted the basic rights in our Constitution, such as freedom of speech, freedom of the press, association and belief. We have defended, yes, media freedom, and we have also defended the independence of the judiciary. We have protected and advanced the rights of members of the LGBTQI+ community and continue to combat all forms of prejudice and intolerance, and particularly also to people with albinism. We have made significant progress on measures to grow our economy, to create jobs, and to reduce poverty. While we have set in motion the process of renewal and reform, there is more work to be done to see these reforms through to the end. We will see the work that is underway and ensure that it goes ahead. Mishumo yeraithoma kahe mingwaha mitano iko bvelela phanḓa idodzula ichibvelela phanḓa leyo yonke lemisebenzi esayiqala izawuqhubeka bayathanda noma abathandi izawuqhubeka. And working with our partners, we will be able to revive our economy. Yes, we will tackle and deal with the debilitating effects of load shedding, our ports and the logistics. We will continue to strengthen our law enforcement institutions, and we will continue to tackle gender-based violence and fight corruption to make South Africa a safe place for all. We will continue to strengthen local government. The initiatives that I spoke to will go ahead. We will professionalize the public service and increase the capacity of the state so that the state can serve our people better. And we will ensure, as the Auditor General has said, that we should hold those in office accountable, and there should be consequence management for those who do wrong things. We will continue to position our economy to grow and compete in a fast-changing world. And we will also support small businesses by providing funding, by providing resources to small and medium enterprises, and to give young people opportunities to thrive and to start their own businesses and to succeed, and to provide social protection to the vulnerable. We will continue the work to improve the country's fiscal position and hold firm to a sound macroeconomic trajectory. We will use the opportunities provided by the African Free Continental Trade Area to increase our trade and expand our industries. We will continue to protect workers' rights and improve their well-being in places of work and to make sure that our workers are well treated. We will continue to build an inclusive economy, focusing on the empowerment of black people and women, South Africans. Yes, we will intensify land reform and pursue a just energy transition that leaves no one behind. Fellow South Africans, as we celebrate these 30 years of freedom, we must remain steadfast in our commitment to our constitutional democracy and its promise for a better life. We should not give in to those who resist the responsibility that the Constitution places on us to correct the injustices of the past and fundamentally transform our economy and society. We must remind these people of the obligation that the Constitution places on the state to progressively realize the rights of everyone to housing, healthcare, food, water, social security, safety, and education. By the same measure, we should not allow anyone to diminish vital democratic institutions, to denigrate our judiciary, or to challenge the constitutional authority of this Parliament. We should not give in to those who seek to divide our nation, to incite violence, and undermine our democracy. As in the past, as in the future, the people of South Africa should stand together against any attempt to reverse the achievements of our democracy. As the chairperson of the Constitutional Assembly, I worked with many great leaders of our country to craft a constitution that truly reflects the will of South African people. As president, I see it as my primary duty to defend our Constitution and to work every day to realize its promise. As we move forward, let us remember that it is up to us, not anyone else, to determine the future of South Africa. We are not passive observers of our history. We are its authors. We are the builders of this country that we call home. As we look towards the next 30 years of freedom, we must choose the kind of country and indeed the kind of world we want to create for ourselves and our children. We are committed to a South Africa in which our common identity lies in our recognition of each other's humanity. We want a country in which every person is free to be exactly who they are, regardless of their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, their ethnicity, or their religion. We want a country in which the same opportunities are available to every child, whether they are born in Sandton, in Mdantsane, in Sikukuni, in Mitchell's Plain, or in Phoenix. We want a country in which the rule of law applies to everyone, no matter how wealthy, they are or what position they hold. As we continue the journey towards making this vision a reality, we are inspired by democracy's children, by their energy, by their creativity and their enthusiasm. We are inspired by the young people who have carried our hopes onto the global stage with their music, with their dance. We are inspired by, yes, the Grammy Award winner who won the Grammy Award recently, like Talo. We are inspired by Bafana Bafana. We are also inspired by the Springboks. Yes, they inspire us. As we mark the 30th anniversary of our freedom, we are reminded of the words of our President Nelson Mandela, who said that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. That is where we are. And he said, I have taken time to rest, to steal a view of the glorious vistas that surrounds me, to look back on the distance I have come. But I can rest only for a moment, for with freedom comes responsibilities, and I dare not linger, for my long walk is not yet ended. Washo uMandela wathi isende lendlela, inde lendlela tsela ena isampanele telle, ho tlameile hore re tsamaye tsela ena, re a rata kapa re rate, setse re le tseleng. While we have come far, yes, we still have a long way to go. Like Madiba, we must keep moving. Always forward, always onwards, towards the country of our dreams. Always believing that our victory is certain, because indeed it is certain. Ke a leboga na cancer, ndiyalibua, ikhensile ngiyabonga kubo bonke abantu balapha eMzantsi Afrika. Nilale kahle, ngiyabonga.
Yes, thank you very much.
It is incorrect for you to have extended an invitation to declare. It is incorrect for you to have extended an invitation to declare.